Enlightened World Network, joined by my dear friend Maggie. And today's topic is heaven and hell, and how we actually create our experience through our perspective and thereby exist in the experience of heaven sometimes and sometimes in hell. So we get to explore our power to create our lives and our experience. But before we get started, let's just take a couple minutes to settle in and get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clear, crisp oxygen just purely flowing into your lungs and nourishing your cells and all your organs, flooding your bloodstream. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, any stress, any toxicity, negativity. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine brilliant, bright, crystalline light just flooding you, brightening you, enlivening, enlightening you from the inside out. And as you exhale, exhale any stress, any remaining tension, toxicity, and allow yourselves to just relax. And now let's just take our palms gently together and softly rub your fingers against your palms and feel the tickling, the tingling, that softness, that sensation, the deliciousness of being here, physical and present. Good morning, Rosalind. Good morning to everybody. It's great to have you here. And we're talking about heaven and hell. And this is really, really talking about relativity in that life. No thanks. Well, this is heaven and hell that's within our control. So what we're talking about is not the religious notions of heaven and hell, but how we create our experience of living through the perspectives that we hold, and how the context that we create in our lives influences or really determines our experience. So when we look for negatives, we find them. When we look for positives, we find them. And we can create all kinds of, and not only can we, but we do create all kinds of experiences, internal experiences. And we do that in a multitude of ways. We do that by interpreting the signals around us in particular ways. So if we've talked this week about confirmation bias. Good morning, Isabel. Great to have you here. And I actually don't know who HGYYYU is, but welcome. And I'm glad to have you here with us too. We're talking about heaven and hell, and how circumstances in our lives can be extremely challenging. And yet we have the option to interpret them, and we do actually interpret them and respond to them from those interpretations, which are often invisible to us because we're so immersed in them that we don't recognize them. Kasabante, Stephen, welcome from Uganda. How wonderful to have you here. So we're talking about heaven and hell, not in a religious sense, but in the sense of our personal experience, because I imagine that all of us have had experiences of living through times that felt quite hellish in our lives, and perhaps, I hope, other times that have felt just heavenly. And the heavenly moments would be moments of joy and delight and peace and pleasure. And good morning, Andrea. Welcome. And Tammy too. It's great to have you guys here. Welcome. So for those who, since we have some a couple new folks here, I just want to introduce Maggie. This is Maggie. She's a new member of my little family, and she's the star of the show, as you can tell. Just ask her. And anyway, we're talking about heaven and hell. And really, what we're talking about is the perspectives that we have on life and the lens that we view and experience life through. And it's not just one lens, it's many lenses. And some of these lenses are familial in that we kind of inherit our perspective on reality from our families in a lot of ways, you know, or our first orientation to reality through our family, through religion, through our educational systems, through the media, through our associations. Good morning. Oh, Isabel says, gorgeous Maggie. Hi, Irma. Welcome, welcome. Great to have you here. So what makes hell hell, I think, to a large degree is a lack of awareness. No biting, Maggie. Gentle, gentle. Hey, time out. Sorry. I think hopefully it's worth having her here for you, that I have to take moments here and there to calm her, because she thinks I'm a pin cushion or a chew stick, a giant chew stick. Anyway, these perspectives that we have, our suffering, our experience of hellishness in our lives is largely a function of our resistance to a situation and wanting something to be different than it is. And so when Tammy says, yes, worth it. Good morning, Dido. Great to have you here. And I'm glad you guys enjoy her being here. I enjoy her being here too. It's just that usually when she behaves poorly, I'm able to, to say, no, Maggie, and when I'm talking, she takes full advantage that I'm not going to be monitoring her behavior as closely. Anyway, I think there are many times when life presents us with situations and circumstances that are heartbreaking, that are painful, that are challenging. And when life becomes hell is when we compound those circumstances with additional resistance. So this is a common theme that I discuss, but what I notice about resistance is that it makes everything harder. And it also tends to embed exactly what we're resisting. So we've all heard the saying, what you resist persists. And I think that that's really quite true. What as we resist it in a weird way, in what seems like a paradoxical way, we're affirming and confirming the thing that we want to be gone, or that we desire something other than. So we, in saying, I don't want to feel this way, what are we doing? We're reinforcing that we feel that way, right? We're acknowledging it, we're reinforcing it. And the brain doesn't really understand don't. In other words, I don't want to feel this way, because in order to not feel this way, I need to invoke what it is to feel this way. Does that make sense? It's kind of a backwards thing, because we tell people, don't do this, don't do that. And what we're doing in a way is sort of giving them a command to do the very thing we're telling them not to. The same thing works with ourselves. When we say, I don't want to feel this way, well, what are we doing? We're feeling that way. And we're affirming it, and we're embedding and reinforcing it. So when we talk about heaven and hell, we do have the ability, and here's the rub, is that we have the ability to transform our state in any given moment. The rub is that in order to do that, we need to remember to do that. We need to remember that we don't have to be feeling this way, that we don't have to be overwhelmed by these feelings. And when we realize that we don't have to, we can start talking about internally to ourselves, potentially. We can start talking about what would feel better. And the thing in this path to feeling better is we might not go immediately from hell to heaven, but we can get there incrementally. And if we look at every step in the direction of our desire as a win, then those steps build upon themselves. And those steps take us closer and closer to our awareness. Hopefully, as we acknowledge those steps, we're building a muscle that is letting us know that we really do have the capacity and the capability to shift our state of being. And with each step, we're building that confidence that we can actually shift things. So every increment, as we recognize and acknowledge it, makes a difference. And Rosalind says, I create the movement. Exactly, the thoughts and response to outside stimulus. This is how I control my life. This is the starting point. Exactly. And here's the thing. This is the starting point. This is the starting point. This is the starting point. So what am I doing? I'm saying it doesn't matter whether I succeeded or failed in the past. I get to start again in this moment, and in this moment, and in this moment. So the past does not have to dictate my future. The past does not have to dictate where I am in this given moment or where I'm going to be in the next moment, because I get to create each moment anew. And as Rosalind said, I create the movement, you create the movement. And the trick, as I said earlier, is remembering, because what happens is we get caught in this drift, we get caught in this flow of momentum where the movement itself is gaining steam and kind of keeping us in that flow. So Isabel says, so true. And we deserve to feel better, have better, and shift higher. We do deserve that. And the thing is that we get to create it for ourselves. And it's not that hard. The challenge is remembering the ways to do this, remembering the fact that we're not subject to the thoughts in our heads. So what happens is that we get in this momentum of thinking certain thoughts, feeling certain feelings, and that momentum kind of submerges our awareness of our ability to choose. When we become aware of those moments, when we in those moments, when we become aware, wow, I'm feeling really miserable, we can shift that experience. We can interact with that experience in a bunch of different ways. One way is to say, why am I feeling miserable? Well, if we ask ourselves, why am I feeling miserable? We're going to find all kinds of reasons why we're feeling miserable. So understand that we're asking questions. The mind wants to answer those questions. So if instead of saying, why am I feeling so miserable, what we might be able to do is ask, what would feel better right now? Even incrementally, what would I prefer right now? And if we think of, I would prefer to feel better. Okay, great. So what would it feel like to feel better? What would it feel like to feel more peace? And then the mind sort of plays with that idea, because the mind, in so many ways, we've heard the expression monkey mind. The mind wants to play with whatever we give it to play with. So if we give it a great question like, what would it feel like to feel peaceful right now? What would it feel like in my body right now to feel peaceful? So framing a question like that is doing multiple things. First, it's giving the mind something to play with. It's giving the mind sort of a command to say, hey, it's time to feel peaceful. But it's doing it in such a way that it intrigues the mind. Instead of trying to boss it around, it's inviting the mind to create this experience for you. And then you're also saying, what would it feel like in my body, so that you can create this visceral experience of peacefulness or of more joy. And we're going to do this incrementally, because if you're filled with anxiety, you're probably not going to go from 90 miles an hour in anxiety to 90 miles an hour at peacefulness, or zero, maybe. I don't know what the velocity of peacefulness is, but what's likely is that you can create a greater sense of peace, a greater sense of ease. And what we want to do is not say, I want to feel less anxious. We want to say, I want to feel more peaceful. Because why do we not want to do less anxious? Because in order to be less anxious, we have to experience anxious. So the way that we speak with ourselves is a really important thing to the experience that we create for ourselves. So when we're saying this sort of question, what would it feel like in my body to feel more peaceful now? Now meaning this moment, not conjecturing later what it's going to feel like, not imagining into the future what it's going to feel like, but right here, right now. What does it feel like? What would it feel like now to be more peaceful? So we're giving the body the body and mind this invitation, which is also kind of a command, a gentle request and command to create this state presently in our body. And it's very, very, very powerful if you engage in that kind of creative, meaning creating, questioning. And Rosalind says, master body, emotion, and thought. Why allow external forces to control you? First, remember who you are. And as you come out of it, you gain a certainty that I control the environment. Well, I think that that's actually true on many, many levels. And at the very least, I can control my response to the environment. and to a great degree, my interaction with the environment. And as an example of that, I can remember times when I have felt cold, physically cold. And typically, like I'm not a person who enjoys cold, I have to say. And I have had all kinds of stories about cold and being cold, and how I can go on and on about me and cold. But anyway, I was in a situation where I was feeling cold and really uncomfortable, and I was saying to myself, I'm so cold, I'm so cold. So of course I was even colder. And then it occurred to me, oh, I don't have to be subject to this experience. And I presenced myself to what would it feel like if I felt warm right now? What would it feel like in my bones if I felt warmer warmer feelings? If what would it feel like if my fingertips were warm and I felt comfortable? And as I was putting my attention, really truly putting my attention on what would that feel like to have my fingertips be warm. And interestingly, right now as I did that, I felt a surge of warmth in my fingertips. And so there are people that say, and I may be one of them, that we are in a constant state of hypnosis. In other words, we're constantly in in a state that is kind of under a spell, not like somebody else is necessarily casting the spell, but that we are these very malleable presences. And Rosalind, when you say master body, mind, and thought, this is a path to mastery, and the biggest part of that path to mastery is the recognition that we have more capacity and capability than we even realize, and that we do have the ability to shift our state and our experience. And I'm not talking about denial of experience. I think it's an interesting um, line to walk between denying our experience and not processing it, particularly emotionally, because emotion is energy. So I have a strong conviction and hypothesis that when we have strong emotions, it's really important to our health and well-being to allow those emotions to move and transform. That's distinct from a lot of our thinking experience. And it's often our thinking that generates these emotions too. And that's where we can utilize this self, you could call it programming, but you could also call it transformation. We can call it any number of different things. The thing is that we do have this capacity to shift our state and to evoke and invoke different experiences. And again, to reiterate, the foundation challenge is awareness, becoming aware. Maggie, no. Maggie, no. Good girl. Is becoming aware of the state that we're in and recognizing that we have choice about it, that we can shift it. And again, allow yourself the freedom to shift incrementally, Because if we recognize that we are energy and we are frequency, that if we are consciously aware, we can elevate our frequency even incrementally, and that shifts the energy that we are, which shifts the interactions that we have, and the attraction that we are. Because in a certain way, like draws like. So if we're vibrating at a particular frequency, then life says, oh, okay, you want that frequency, great, here you go. And by shifting our frequency, we shift our point of attraction as energy and energetic beings. So the bottom line is that heaven and hell is largely of our own creation. Not to say that there aren't hellish experiences, but we do have certain freedom in choosing how we interact with those experiences. So the meta perspective is recognizing that we are not our thoughts, we are not our positions, we are not our beliefs, we are not our identities. All of those things are constructs. And they're constructs that either we inherit or we manufacture. And as such, they are mutable, because we are so much more than all of that. We are all of that and more, is another way to put it. And so you could say we are our beliefs, we are our identities, we are our thoughts, we are our emotions, and we are so much more, meaning we're not bound by the limits of those things. So welcome, Sally. Great to have you here. It's been a while. Good to see you, or see your name. And so there's so much in the world happening that can be interpreted as heaven or hell. And the more adept we become at navigating that and being the stewards of our lives and of our thoughts, of our emotions, compassionate stewards. I want to say that, compassionate stewards. So we don't get to say, oh, there I go with all the negative thoughts again. I failed, I'm terrible, kind of thing. It's a matter of recognizing the course that we're on and making course corrections. So when a ship is being piloted or a plane is being piloted, when you're off course, it's not first of all, it's normal to be drifting off course and then correcting, and drifting off course and correcting. And the idea here is to make those course corrections without judgment. It's just readjusting till we get, as we're navigating. And so we get to view the experiences that are uncomfortable in life as feedback, and the experiences that are comfortable and pleasant and joyful, what it is feedback. So it's kind of looking at the GPS or whatever and seeing, oh, get back on course, or this is a good course, or this is the course that I'm choosing to follow. It's all feedback, and it's us that us who, it's we who, it's we who um, put the judgment of good or bad, success or failure, better, worse on things. It's not like that's an absolute. And I'm thinking about how there's so much talk about shadow work and integrating the shadow. And this is part of the heaven and hell idea, you know, the black and white, the good, the bad. You know, there are all aspects of ourselves that we judge very harshly, that we might call the shadow side, the part that's angry or violent, or any number of other things that we might judge as negative. And when we are able to embrace our whole selves and to issue forgiveness to ourselves and acceptance, compassionate acceptance, and ownership, when we're able to incorporate our whole selves in our awareness of who we are without shame, like recognizing maybe I did something that I would not choose to do again, and I learned from that, or I recognized that where I was coming from was a place that precipitated that kind of action, and I choose to move beyond that. I choose to recognize that I'm human, and all of us have all aspects. And so there's an acceptance and a forgiveness that doesn't mean that you're doomed to repeat whatever the things were that caused you so much pain, which of shame and guilt and sorrow and anger. That we're not doomed to repeat those things. Isabel says, "You're such a great explanation speaker. You make it seem easy." Thank you. Isabel, thank you for that, because so many times I get into these loops and I'm not sure if I'm being really clear about it, but I appreciate that feedback. Thank you. And yeah, so heaven and hell, it's interesting to think that a path, part of our path to heaven or ease and grace, if that, I don't know if that's your association for heaven, but that's what I would imagine when I think of heaven, is grace and peace and beauty, and is accepting our own hell, you know, is incorporating and metabolizing the fact that we are all of it. There's not a human being on the planet that doesn't have the light and the dark. At least I'm speaking that, and I would say that of saints as well. Not that I know that any personally to prove that by, but that's my hypothesis. And when we accept our humanity, there's a humility about that. There's a humility about recognizing that we are all of it, and we can then release the expectations of ourselves to be perfection, because when there's a tyranny around the notion of perfection, because it's inachievable. we might have a moment where we can create something that we can say, oh, it's perfect, or we can allow. So here's the thing, again, dichotomies, but we can allow that everything is perfect. And also the striving for perfection is a way to create hell for ourselves, because what's happening there is a judgment. And again, um, perfection in that striving aspect is an external. It's putting our value outside of ourselves rather than the doing or the expression, the experience of the process of doing whatever we're doing. When we can be present to the joy of the process, that in itself is its own perfection. So we've covered a wide gamut here, talking about heaven and hell. Hopefully we can embrace our creative capacities here, our capacity as creators of our experience, and move ourselves incrementally into a place that an experience that's more heavenly. Rosalind says, forgiveness is not the same as making excuses for our past. Exactly. Thank you for that, Rosalind. Exactly. It's not making excuses. It's maybe understanding and compassionately being aware of our experience and the context, and recognizing that we all have times when we behave in ways that are not our ideal. And Rosalind goes on to say, if we make excuses, we never make progress. I'm glad you touched on acceptance of imperfection. Yes, so that's really what forgiveness is for ourselves, is recognizing, first of all, this whole notion of perfection, it's craziness, it's a whole manufactured thing, right? It really is. Unless we allow life as it is to be perfect, because that, to me anyway, that is the truth of perfection, is that life is perfect as it is, even if I don't see it, even if I don't get it, even if I would maybe have it be different. What if it's perfect as it is? And living into that context. And so forgiveness is not making excuses, it's recognition. It's recognition of a dynamic, and it is um, true forgiveness. True forgiveness is actually um, compassionate acceptance. I think it's non-judgment. It's not making excuses. It's recognizing. So it's kind of, to me anyway, it's like recognizing there's a certain dynamic and certain conditions that were existing, and to see that, and to humbly have that recognition and compassionate understanding. And as you said, Rosalind, it's not making excuses. Sally says, I certainly do. But we need to remember that we are human first, and we'll make a ton of errors through life. It's more about our reaction to them and how we forgive ourselves and love on. I love that. I don't know if you meant to say live on, but I love that you said love on. Yes. And so when we talk about making errors, what happens is when we do things, we make decisions, we take actions that we don't admire, to be generous here. We tend to judge ourselves, and there's shame and guilt and self-blame, And we don't really get to be whole until we make peace with those circumstances. Holding the shame and the guilt and the blame is kind of like the resistance that helps to make certain things persist, because then there's denial, or there's reactivity, or it's not complete. The process is not complete. And the process of healing, you know, we shame and guilt and self-blame are ways that we keep ourselves small, are ways that we keep ourselves from really being expressed. And it's when we make peace with our past, in accepting that is what was, without the judgment, like A, B, C, this is what was, not and therefore I'm a terrible person. It's like, okay, that's what I did. And I don't do that now. And the shame and the guilt and the self-blame were tools for me to learn that I don't want to do that again, because it was extremely painful. And Tammy, replying to Isabel, I agree. I agree. Mira always has the right words, and she takes a breath to find them before she speaks them. Love that. Thank you. Thank you, Tammy. I don't know if those are awkward silences, but sometimes it's worth thinking before speaking, right? I've learned that. That's one of the things I've learned over time. And still, I don't always feel that I have the right words, but I so appreciate that. Anyway, we really covered a lot of ground today. This was great. And I so appreciate you and your engagement. And I encourage all of us to move incrementally in awareness toward toward the heaven that we can create here for ourselves and each other. And with that, I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. This is Maggie. And we go live each weekday morning on Enlightened World Network Facebook page. And I invite you to check out all the other at 9 a.m. weekdays. And I invite you to check out the other wonderful programming and community at the Enlightened World Network Facebook page. And until next time, I wish you guys a wonderful weekend, and find your path to heaven, even just small steps, one step after another. So until next time, lots and lots of love.